Hisar Foundation and Engro Foundation, in association with TV1, NewsOne, Wakeup and FM 91, presents the 5th Karachi International Water Conference webinar series on climate change and pandemic impact on water.
I'm Zareen Bakir. I'm a Gender and Natural Resource Management Specialist and also a Council member of Hisar Foundation. I'd like to welcome you all to the 5th Karachi International Water Conference on Climate Change and the Pandemic, the Impact on Water, presented by Hisar Foundation. Today is the last webinar of the series, which is on water and climate change, reimagining women's leadership.
The 4 webinars that we have culminated through the webinar series. The first one was Code Red for Humanity, Climate Action Now. The second is Circular Water Economy in Urban Context. The third was Thinking the Unthinkable, Harnessing the Pandemic to Improve SDG 6 Health and Sanitation. And the fourth one that we're gathered here today, Water and Climate Change, Reimagining Women's Leadership.
Climate, COVID, and conflict are going to be the new normal and a game changer on a planet that is warming up rapidly and a world where the population growth rate is exceeding the capacity of the finite resources that sustain life. This imbalance will widen the supply and demand gap, pitting vested interest groups against each other, triggering demographic shifts, and creating new pockets of vulnerability.
Talking about changing women's role in the water sectors, as my friend Aisha just mentioned, that change is already happening. Women are actually prepared. They care about things and they are prepared because they have been doing this for centuries. Okay? The day-to-day bag-breaking work, which is what we now require to handle the problems and the climate-related problems, they have done it for centuries. So now they are prepared to live in a climate-changed world. Men are not.
So our next speaker is Fazilda Nabil, who will be talking about When Women Lead, looking back at eco-feminist movements in history. Fazilda Nabil is a doctoral researcher and tutor in international development at the University of Sussex. Fazilda, please go ahead. Welcome.
हमारी अगली स्पीकर हैं डॉक्टर फजल्दा नबील, जो कि यूनिवर्सिटी ऑफ ससेक्स में रिसर्चर डेवलपमेंट स्टडीज़ हैं। इनका मौजू है जब ख़वातीन क़यादत करती हैं, माजी की माहौलियात पसंद तहरीक पर एक नज़र।
Hi, thank you so much. First of all, I'd just like to begin by thanking Hisar Foundation, particularly Seema Kamal and Sana and Faria, for giving me the opportunity to speak about something that's so close to my heart. So in my talk today, I really want to sort of, to set them just apart from the forward-looking talks from both Aisha and Simi. I want to go back in history and explore the role of women in leading efforts for change, drawing inspiration from the famous historical environmental movements led by women, such as, in the case of the Love Canal, the Chipko movement, the Greenbelt movement in Kenya, which is more well known. And I want us to be able to draw inspiration from these eco-feminist movements in order to analyze how, or in order to realize how we can bolster women's role for effectively leading climate activism in Pakistan. Building on very many of the things that Simi talked about. So first, before I discuss the 2 stories that I want to discuss, the 2 case studies that I selected for this talk, I would very quickly and very simply, without getting into any dense definitions, I want to simply unpack the idea of what ecofeminism is and why it's relevant. So ecofeminism is both an ideology and a movement that sees climate change, gender equality, and social injustice as related issues. And they're all tied to masculine dominance, male dominance in the society. People who are most affected by environmental destruction, which has been established by studies over and over again, women, particularly indigenous women, who are dependent on their natural environment for subsistence, and also women of color, are the ones who are who are best equipped to address the environmental destruction and identify the right solutions. So the idea that, when you're close to the problem, you're essentially also the best person, or you're essentially also the closest to figuring out the solutions, is what really makes the case for, promulgating the role of women as far as climate activism is concerned. Now, with this background, I want to discuss two examples of grassroots activism by women, one of which is from the Global South, the Chipko movement, and then the other is from the Global North, and then see how we, as locally in Pakistan, the nature of the climate action movement, of climate activism in Pakistan, and how it can draw inspiration from these movements. So the first, the Chipko movement, the Chipko literally just means to embrace, and to embrace a tree, to avoid it from being felled. It was a non-violent movement that started back in 1973 in the Uttarakhand region in India. It is best remembered for collective mobilization of women for the protection of the forest. So what happened was that the forest department in Uttarakhand, it refused to grant permission to these villagers, the local indigenous women and men, to fell ash trees for making agricultural tools. However, instead, the forest department gave permission to a sports good manufacturer, corporate company, to clear that area of land for commercial use. So this was an example of activism by indigenous women who had very little or no training, for this kind of activism, but to whom this resource, the forest trees, were so central. Now, in my next story, or the next little a case study that I want to discuss, we'll travel all the way from the forest in northern India to Love Canal, which is a suburban housing society in the Niagara Falls in the 1950s in the United States, and see how working class women at home were able to bring about a phenomenal change when confronted with an ecological crisis. So the Love Canal story is similar but a little different. In this case, in the 1900s, there was an entrepreneur by the name of William Love who began to dig a canal close to the Niagara Falls, to the Niagara River, in fact, in an attempt to use the Niagara Falls water power as a source of renewable energy. But about a couple of years into the construction of the canal, the project was abandoned because it was no longer feasible. Tesla had come up with a better way of harnessing renewable energy in that area. And then this excavated site where the canal was being dug became a dumping site for effluents, both from the city of Niagara Falls, also from the US Army, and then a chemical company which set up. So it had all sorts of about 21,000 tons of chemical waste were deposited over the next 30 years in this excavated site. And it included radioactive waste, it included a dioxin, it included pesticides, caustic solvents. What is worse is, the Hooker Chemical Company, it just simply covered the area. And so after the canal had reached its capacity and it could not take any more effluent, the Hooker Chemical Company simply lined the area with clay, and underneath there were all these caustic effluents in metal barrels, buried underneath. So what happens about 30, 40 years later is that the Niagara Falls School Board was looking for some cheap land, and the Hooker Chemical Company offered this land on which, under which lay that toxic effluent. And the Niagara Falls School Board bought it for $1, simply just $1. And after this, because of the school that was constructed there in the adjoining area, there was a housing society that was constructed, and everything remained nice and pretty for about 20 years until the residents started having issues. They started complaining of smells in their stench from the basement, chemical stench. They were experiencing, in a particular given year, only about 4 out of 26 births were normal babies. The results were miscarriages or birth defects. So a lot happening in that area. And this is when this stay-at-home mother by the name of Louise Gibbs, she came up. And she collected, she realized that there's something deeper going on here, and she collected the women of the area. She formed an association called the Love Canal Homeowners Association, and the women got together. They fought for 5 years, and they eventually won. But what do these two movements, the nature of these are kind of different and yet the same. What do these two movements mean for, charting the roadmap for the future of women's leadership, climate action in Pakistan? We have seen inspiring examples of women's activism around the world. We've also seen climate activism and women's role, on the front line. For a few years now, there's citizen groups such as Climate Action Now, the Hukuk-e-Khalq movement, the Women and Water networks, such as one run by Hisar Foundation. They all give women a chance to lead and a space to lead climate activism. And this is all very heartening. In Pakistan, the identification of indigenous peoples is tricky. But for instance, the Hindko-speaking people in the Swat and Chitral valleys, the tribal peoples in the Gilgit-Baltistan region, the Saraiki, the Potohari, the tribal people of the Indus, all of these communities and the women in these communities need to be empowered. If we are to, or if we want to truly scale up truly and inclusively scale up women's leadership for environmental activism. I think I'll end here, and I'll be open to questions whenever you're ready to take them.
Thank you so much, Fazilda, for such an inspiring presentation.
डॉक्टर फजल्दा नबील, मैं हिसार फाउंडेशन की बहुत शुक्रगुजार हूँ जिन्होंने मुझे मेरे पसंदीदा मौजू पर बात करने का मौका दिया। मैं आयशा और सीमी की ही बात को आगे बढ़ाऊंगी और तारीख में होने वाले माहौलियाती तहरीक में जिन औरतों ने बहुत बड़ा किरदार अदा किया के हवाले से बात करूंगी, जैसे कि ग्रीन बेल्ट मूवमेंट, कीनिया मूवमेंट थी, और मैं कोशिश करूंगी कि इसके ज़रिए हमारी ख़वातीन की हौसला अफजाई हो और वो पानी के हवाले से अपने किरदार को अदा करने के लिए आगे आएं। जैसे कि सीमी ने भी जिक्र किया, अपनी बात आगे बढ़ाने से पहले मैं माहौलियात पसंदी के हवाले से थोड़ी बात करना चाहूँगी कि माहौलियात पसंदी है क्या। माहौलियात पसंदी एक नज़रिया और तहरीक दोनों हैं जिसमें माहौलियाती तब्दीली, सनती मसावात और माशरती नाइंसाफ़ी सब शामिल हैं, और ये सब एशियाई निज़ाम से जुड़े हुए हैं, और जो लोग इससे सबसे ज़्यादा मुतासिर हैं इनमें ज़्यादातर ख़वातीन हैं। जब आप मसले से दो चार हो जाते हैं तो यकीनन आप इसके हल के बहुत करीब होते हैं। अब मैं दो तहरीकों के हवाले से बात करना चाहूँगी। इनमें एक है चिपको मूवमेंट। चिपको का मतलब है दरख्त को ऐसे गले लगाना कि इसे गिरने से बचाया जा सके। ये एक गैर मुतशद्दिद तहरीक थी जो कि इंडिया के अत्थरकंड खित्ते में 1973 में चलाई गई। इसे जंगलात की हिफाजत के लिए ख़वातीन के किरदार और आगाही के हवाले से याद किया जाता है। हुआ ये था कि इदारे जंगलात ने गांव के इन लोगों को एस्ट्रेज गिराकर ज़राअत करने से मना कर दिया था, जबकि इसी इदारे जंगलात ने एक खेल का सामान बनाने वाली कंपनी को इस जगह पर फैक्ट्री लगाने की इजाज़त दे दी थी। तो ये एक मिसाल है इन ख़वातीन की जिन्हें इस तरह की तहरीक चलाने की कोई तरबियत हासिल नहीं थी। अब मेरी अगली कहानी में हम सफ़र करेंगे इंडिया के एक गांव से, लव कैनाल का, जो कि एक शहरी सोसाइटी बनी 1959 नायग्रा फॉल में। तो लव कैनाल की कहानी कुछ मिलती जुलती और कुछ मुख्तलिफ है। 19वीं सदी में लव कैनाल को एक सोसाइटी बनाने की तैयारी शुरू हुई, मगर 1920 में म्यूनिसिपल ने सोसाइटी के लिए जगह देने से इनकार कर दिया, जिसके बाद ये जगह महज कचरा फेंकने के काम आने लगी। इस कनाल को एक केमिकल कंपनी ने खरीद लिया और वो अपना जाया शुदा केमिकल इस कैनाल में फेंकने लगे, जिसमें बहुत से जहरीले मादे शामिल थे। ये सिलसिला कई दिहाइयों तक चलता रहा और फिर इस केमिकल के जहरीले असरात सामने आना शुरू हो गए, जिनमें लोगों में बीमारियां बढ़ने लगी और इनके घरों तक इस केमिकल की बू आने लगी। जब यहाँ की रिहायशी खातून वकअप ने कदम उठाया और अपने साथ खवातीन को शामिल करके इसके खिलाफ एक तहरीक चलाई जो कि 5 साल तक चलती रही, तो कैसे ये दोनों तहरीकें बेक वक्त अलग भी हैं और एक जैसी भी, और कैसे ये कहानियां पाकिस्तान की खवातीन की हौसला अफजाई में किरदार अदा कर सकती हैं। पिछले कई सालों में बहुत सी तहरीक चलाई गई। पाकिस्तान के बहुत से खित्ते, जिनमें गिलगित बल्तिस्तान, चित्राल, जहां हिंद को बोली जाती है, इस सराइकी खित्ते, पोटोहारी और सिंध के बहुत से खित्ते शामिल हैं। यहाँ पर खवातीन को तरबियत देने की शदीद ज़रूरत है ताकि औरतें माहौल के हवाले से अपना बेहतरीन किरदार अदा कर सकें। अब यहाँ पर मैं अपनी बात ख़त्म करती हूँ।
Move on to the next portion of the webinar, the panel discussion. I'd like to introduce Meher Naushirwani, who will be moderating the next session. She is a specialist on conservation and environmental management with a particular expertise on gender. With over 35 years of experience, she brings a unique multi-stakeholder perspective to all her work. She's a board member of Hisar Foundation and is a treasurer and board member of the Karachi Conference Foundation.
बहुत शुक्रिया फजलदा। अब मैं अपने प्रोग्राम के अगले हिस्से पैनल डिस्कशन की तरफ बढ़ूंगी। हमारी अगली स्पीकर हैं मेहर नौशेरवानी, जो कि हिसार फाउंडेशन की मेंबर हैं और IUCN में चेयर स्पेशलिस्ट बराए सनफ, माहौल और माशियात हैं।
Handing over to you.
Thanks, Zareen. Thank you very much. And welcome participants and our panelists today to the second half of our session. It's a pleasure to be here, and I look forward to another stimulating discussion over the next half an hour, 45 minutes. I'd like to begin by introducing the first panelist today that we have, Seema Tahir Khan. And Seema, I'd like to begin by, you're here with us in the studio, but just to give a brief introduction. Seema is a communication specialist in the field for 40 years, co-founder of Interflow Group of Companies, currently CEO of Airways Media Private Limited, member of Hisar think tank on food and water sustainability. You create awareness campaigns on food, water and livelihood issues, including talk shows, reports and TV serials on the subject. You're an executive member of various boards and an advocate of nature-based solutions to address sustainability objectives. It's a pleasure to have you here today, Seema. We have 3 questions for all the panelists. So I'll put the questions to you first, and then you can answer as you like in whatever order you want. But the questions today are focusing on equal participation and mandates for decision making in terms of women's role in the water sector, climate change and the impact on water, future challenges for gender equity, and how do you reimagine women's leadership? So these are the sort of broad ambit or the broad questions that we're posing to all our panelists today. And you have 8 minutes, and you can speak in terms of your experience in the field, in terms of women's leadership, how you see, how you reimagine it, how you think women's, because from what we've heard from the discussions already, what are your perspectives? What does your experience say? How do we move forward?
मेहर नौशरवानी, बहुत बहुत शुक्रिया। तमाम पैनलिस्ट को खुशामदीद कहती हूँ। मुझे उम्मीद है कि अगले 45 मिनट पर हम मुफीद मालूमात इकट्ठी कर सकेंगे। सबसे पहले शुरुआत में पहली पैनलिस्ट सीमा ताहिर खान से करूंगी, जो कि कम्युनिकेशन स्पेशलिस्ट हैं और एयरवेज मीडिया की CEO भी हैं। माहौल के हवाले से इनकी कई खिदमात रही हैं। इंटरफ्लो ग्रुप की को फाउंडर भी हैं। माहौलियाती आगाही के हवाले से भी इन्होंने बहुत काम किया है। सीमा, हमारे 3 सवालात हैं। पहला सवाल, पानी के सेक्टर में औरतों की मसावी शमूलियत, फिर माहौलियाती तब्दीली के पानी पर असरात और मुस्तकबिल में दरपेश मसाइल और इनके मनफी मसावात पर असरात, और तीसरा ये कि आप खवातीन की क़यादत को कैसे देखती हैं। तो ये सवालात हैं जो हम तमाम पैनलिस्ट से करेंगे। आपके पास 8 मिनट हैं।
Assalamu alaikum, and thank you Hisar Foundation, Dynamic Seema Kamal, and the rest of you for having me here. As far as I'm concerned, I'm neither a specialist nor an expert. I am perhaps a tool for communicating all the concerns and all the observations and all the policy decisions through media.
Okay.
So, as far as I'm concerned, I'd like to take the last bit as to answer the question.
Certainly.
So, reimagining women leadership. Because I am also a visualizer of sorts, so I will take you and the rest of the listeners on a flight of fantasy. I will start with my imagination. So in my imagination, I see a pregnant woman, well nourished, strong and sturdy, looking forward to childbirth, her second child being born after a gap of 3 years. I imagine a little girl going to school from a conservative neighborhood where she sees the mullah from the mosque waving to her as she passes by. I see a woman picking cotton in the fields in the scorching sun, and I see her at the end of the day, she's collecting cash as her labor given to her. I see a woman walking into a skill development center in the rural area with a nursery, a child care or daycare center where she can leave her children and go to work. I see a woman at a cash counter where easy to access banking services available to her at her doorstep. I see a woman financially stronger. I see a woman physically fitter. I see a woman happier in her environment at home or in a workplace. I see a woman who has the potential to rise and become a leader. While the ground realities have been very well clearly defined, spoken of, we know that the ground realities do not permit a woman to provide her or reach her full potential. So then I look at a stereotypical image of a woman anywhere in the world, particularly in South Asia, and I see a house sparrow. I see a docile house sparrow, or I see a graceful swan, but I see a mute woman. So I turn to nature for my inspiration, and I see the animal world. I see the lioness, I see other mothers, I see other female counterparts, and I choose to be an eagle, a female eagle. Why do I choose a female eagle to represent women? Is because there is a tide of change coming about. Environmental, climate change, political changes. We see an oligarchy governing. We see an elite in every parliament. We see women's voices being subdued. So I am an eagle soaring in the sky. And I will tell you the reason why I am an eagle. When we study an eagle's life, we see that a young eaglet learns to fly very fast. Why? Because her mother has torn down the nest, her comfort zone. This enables the eagle to spread her wings, the eaglet to spread her wings and attempt at flying. And soon she masters it and she flies high in the sky. Then I see an eagle in search of food for her, the eaglets. And from the height she will have a target, she will be focusing on food that she has to pick for her young ones. And she is going to brave any storm, any harsh wind, anything under this, on the planet to reach that target. So it's not by willpower, it's by wing power. She uses that wing power to reach to her destination. Then I see the eagle carrying a twig across the skies. Why is she doing that? She has a mate who's given a call for mating, but she doesn't make it simple for him. So she will drop the twig from a height and expect him to dive down, pick up that twig. In the meantime, she's flown higher. So it's making it even more difficult for him to reach that height. So she is not available and she is not attainable that easily. So when I compare the life of any woman across continents, I feel that it's time for women, the complexion to change. For the eagle is seeing women, the eagle is flying all across the globe, and she's seeing difficult terrain, she's seeing different complexion, she's seeing different women. And if the eagle can spot a girl in a chadar or in a scarf, a young girl from Pakistan, a remote Pakistani area, receive a Nobel Prize. When she sees young Greta standing up on a platform outside the summit and challenging governments and challenging leaders. She flies down south and she sees a woman trucker at a coal mine carrying coal across an arid land. She sees women across a scorching desert or an arid land carrying matkas of water to a destination 10 miles away. When she sees a drowning country, submerged country, have a woman in a sari clad woman who can take the country out of the dire straits and become an Asian tiger. When she sees a young woman from New Zealand stand up and face the hostility against religions and ethnic divides and challenge that and ask for tolerance and ask for considerations and ask for inclusions, she knows there's hope for the woman. And she knows that against these rising tides, against this threat of climate change, it will be women who will stand up and make the difference. So what is really required is inclusivity and integration of the rural woman into the policy making, the decision making, the roadmap creation, because they come with their indigenous solutions, they come with their strengths. So we must include them, but each and every one of us can play a role, and as media I have been trying, I will go on. Give me the stories from the rural, give me the stories from across the world, I'll visualize them, create drama or create talk shows or create webinars. So that's my contribution.
Thank you, Seema. I think for your articulation and clarity in terms of the issues, in terms of the picture you paint, the dream that we all aspire to, the reality of what we're all very aware of, but more importantly, the way you showed us the solutions and the way forward and how women can achieve what we want to achieve.
It is a matter of self-esteem
yes, yes.
and realizing of one's potential.
Yes.
So when there are mentors, there are heroes from women, there are guides, there are policy makers and those in positions to implement. So let us all be a combined force that can facilitate them, and let us then reach out to our sisters across the country and see, because 51% women in the country are not a small number. We will, she has to rise.
She has to rise.
She will rise.
She will, yeah, she will.
So let's help her.
Certainly, yes, definitely. And I think in terms of what you have said, you've also shown us how change is possible and how we can actually move towards changing and bringing women into the mainstream, which is what we're here for today. There must be many questions from you, Seema, but I'll go to the next panelist and then we'll start.
May I say
yes,
something
certainly.
Before?
Yes,
because
certainly,
I'm thinking
certainly.
of that famous sher that most people will know. Nahi tera nasheman qasr sultani ki gumbad pe, tu shahi hai basera kar pahadon ki chatanon par. The first time I'm thinking that the Shaheen Iqbal meant is a she-eagle. Yes, it's a she-eagle, and we never thought of it that way before.
Right.
So thank you, Seema, for reimagining that.
Yes,
But
that's right.
I just add to this.
Please.
When Iqbal thought of the he-eagle per se, and there's something nature has taught us about the male eagle, is when he grows old and weary, he goes to the hill, mountain top, he sits there and plucks out his feathers. Until new feathers appear, he will be in that seclusion. He will only surface after his body is covered with new feathers, so that he can take to the skies again. So when वो बसेरा कर रहा है वहाँ पे, it's not because he is meant to sit there. It's because out of necessity he has gone there to re-emerge.
Yes, right.
That's really interesting.
That's very
Women
interesting.
re-emerging, hey?
Yes,
Yes.
the reimagining and re-emerging. You know, as also as agents have changed. I mean, one of our earlier speakers said that we have to change the victim image of women. And that is so true, because now women are agents of change, and that's what we have to move forward. That's the image that we now
But
need.
it is also, I'm sorry I'm extending my,
No, go
my time, but you see the stereotypical imaging
Yes.
of a mute woman
Yes,
must now be countered.
that's right.
The parliamentarian, the patriarch, the decision maker will deny, because they are clutching on to their positions and their security is there. The parliament is their security blanket, the senate is their security blanket, top positions are their security blanket.
Yes.
That is their vote bank, and they will feed that vote bank to be in that position. We have to defy
Defy that, yes.
and challenge. So we have to be the eagle that soars.
सीमा ताहिर खान, बहुत बहुत शुक्रिया हिसार फाउंडेशन और सीमी कमाल आपका। सबसे पहले मैं आखिरी सवाल का जवाब देना चाहूँगी। तो ख़वातीन की क़यादत का तसव्वुर मैं आप सबको तख्लियाती ज़िंदगी में लिए जाना चाहूँगी। मैं देखती हूँ कि एक सेहतमंद शादीशुदा औरत को जो कि हामला है और जिसका दूसरा बच्चा पैदा होने वाला है पहले बच्चे की पैदाइश के 3 साल बाद, और अब तसव्वुर करूँगी कि एक ऐसी बच्ची जो कि स्कूल जाती है, जिसका ताल्लुक़ एक दकियानूसी घराने से है, और वो देखती है कि मस्जिद का एक मुल्ला इसे हाथ हिला हिला कर देख रहा है। जैसे ही वो इसके पास से गुज़रती है, मैं देखती हूँ कि एक किसान खातून को जो कि दिन भर खेती बाड़ी करने के बाद शाम में अपनी उजरत ले रही है। मैं देखती हूँ एक शहरी औरत को जो कि एक चाइल्ड केयर में अपने बच्चे को छोड़कर अपने काम पर जा सकती है। मैं एक औरत को बैंक के कैश काउंटर पर देखती हूँ। मैं एक औरत को मुआशी तौर पर मुस्तहकम देखती हूँ। मैं एक औरत को जिस्मानी तौर पर सेहतमंद देखती हूँ। मैं एक औरत को खुश देखती हूँ, चाहे वो घर में हो या काम की जगह पर। मैं एक औरत को आगे बढ़ने की सलाहियत से भरपूर देखती हूँ। हम क्योंकि ज़मीनी हक़ाइक़ पर बात कर चुके हैं और ज़मीनी हक़ाइक़ इसके बरक्स हैं, फिर मैं देखती हूँ एक दुनिया में औरत के एक दकियानूसी तसव्वुर को ख़ास तौर पर जनूबी एशिया में, और मुझे सिर्फ घर की एक चिड़िया, बहुत सी मादा जानवरों को भी देखती हूँ, शेरनी को भी देखती हूँ, और मैं चील बनना पसंद करती हूँ। क्यों? क्योंकि चील का बच्चा बहुत जल्दी उड़ना सीख लेता है, इसलिए क्योंकि इसकी माँ बहुत जल्द घोंसला तोड़ देती है तो बच्चे को आसमान में उड़ना जल्दी आ जाता है। फिर मैं चील को देखती हूँ कैसे वो अपने बच्चों के लिए खाने की तलाश में रहती है, और इतनी ऊंचाई से भी इसकी नज़रें ज़मीन पर मरकूज होती हैं जहाँ से वो अपने बच्चों के लिए खाना हासिल कर सके, और इसके लिए वो हर किस्म की मुश्किल और तूफ़ान के सामना कर सकती है। फिर मैं चील को देखती हूँ कि कैसे इसे नर चील मिलने के लिए बुलाता है, मगर वो मज़ीद ऊंचाई की तरफ चली जाती है, यानी मादा चील नर के लिए आसानी से दस्तयाब नहीं होती। तो जब मैं औरतों को देखती हूँ तो अब वक्त है कि हमारी ख़वातीन भी चील से सबक हासिल करें। एक चील पूरी दुनिया में उड़ती है, वो हर रंग हर नस्ल की औरत को देखती है। वो देखती है कि पाकिस्तान की एक देही इलाके की लड़की नोबेल इनाम जीत सकती है। इसी तरह ग्रेटा इतनी ही हम उम्र में दुनिया के बड़े बड़े लीडरों की चैलेंज कर सकती है। वो देखती है कि एक औरत बड़ा सा ट्रक लेकर कोयले की कानों में काम कर रही है। फिर चील देखती है कि औरतें पानी के मटके सर पर लेकर 10-10 मील के सफ़र तय करती हैं। फिर वो देखती है कि एक साड़ी वाली औरत कैसे अपने मुल्क को खड़ा कर रही है। फिर वो देखती है कि न्यूजीलैंड की एक जवान औरत कैसे मजहबी इंतहा पसंदी के खिलाफ आवाज़ उठा रही है और कैसे सबको बर्दाश्त का दर्ज दे रही है। और چیل جانتی ہے کہ جب اس وقت میں جب کہ ہمیں ماحولیاتی تبدیلی کا سامنا ہے، خواتین ہی اس کا مقابلہ کر سکیں گی اور بہتری لا سکیں گی۔ تو ضرورت اس بات کی ہے کہ دیہی خواتین کو پالیسی سازی میں ساتھ ملایا جائے، کیونکہ ان کے پاس مسائل کے حل موجود ہیں اور وہ بڑی تعداد میں ہیں۔ ہم سب اپنا کردار ادا کر سکتے ہیں۔ میں خود بحیثیت میڈیا پرسن اس حوالے سے اپنا کردار ادا کر سکتی ہوں۔ آپ مجھے اس حوالے سے کہانی دیں اور میں اس پر ڈرامہ بنا سکتی ہوں یا پھر کوئی ٹاک شو بنا سکتی ہوں۔ بہت بہت شکریہ سیما، آپ نے جیسے ہمیں بتایا اور جیسے حل بتائے وہ بہت مفید ہیں۔ آپ نے ہمیں بتایا کہ کیسے تبدیلی ممکن ہے۔ سیما جی بالکل، ہمیں اب ضرور اس بارے میں بات کرنی چاہیے اور ایک دوسرے کی مدد کرنی چاہیے۔ 51% آبادی عورتوں کی کم نہیں ہے، ہمیں آگے بڑھنا ہوگا۔ سیمی کمال: مہر میں کچھ کہنا چاہوں گی۔ نہیں تیرا نشیمن قصر سلطانی کی گنبد پر، تو شاہین ہے بسیرا کر پہاڑوں کی چٹانوں میں۔ پہلی بار میں نے تصور کیا کہ اقبال نے جس شاہین کی بات کی ہے وہ مادہ تھی۔ تو شکریہ سیما کہ آپ نے ہمیں یہ تصور دیا۔ سیما: کچھ چیزوں کے بارے میں قدرت نے ہمیں سکھایا ہے اور کچھ چیزیں اب بدلنی چاہیے، جیسے کہ عورتوں کو ایک دقیانوسی خاموش تصور۔